Hola amigos, estamos aquí en en el cuarto Congreso de Logoterapia y Análisis Existencial y estamos aquí con uno de sus ponentes, Stefan Schulenberg, y él nos habló, nos hizo una conferencia espectacular sobre desastres y catástrofes y él nos va a contar más o menos de su experiencia trabajando en este campo. Welcome Stefan to our program. We're glad to have you here, and to start, I would like to have a brief presentation of your career and what you do.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate your interest. My name is Stefan Schulenberg. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Mississippi. I'm also the director of the University of Mississippi's Clinical Disaster Research Center. My PhD is in clinical psychology, which I earned in 2001. And at the same time, I was studying disaster mental health, and this was in graduate training at the University of South Dakota. And since that time, I've been working at the University of Mississippi studying meaning in life, but also how meaning and resilience and post-traumatic growth, how those things relate to people's experiences during times of disaster, earthquakes, hurricanes, Gulf oil spill. Being three examples, I suppose, but really it has relevance for many different kinds of contexts.
That's awesome. And like to start, I want to know. You mentioned in short, since you work in action in the place of disaster, you have short-term interventions with the people. So you have to establish a quick report and a healthy report, like in 10 minutes. You have an intervention very short. So what would you propose? What would you propose to achieve this?
There are many different techniques that are used, many of which have research support. In the United States, we use a group of techniques called psychological first aid, or PFA. It's a series of techniques that anyone can learn. It's not just for mental health professionals, but the number one thing in times of a crisis or a disaster is to use people's social support. And so that is to take advantage of friends and family. From a more physical sense, there are things that you can do like deep breathing, slow breathing. Many people breathe very quickly or very shallow, and so just by stopping and pausing and just breathing very deeply in and out and controlling your breathing can be very helpful in enhancing that sense of calm. For some people, just closing their eyes, stopping and pausing and just kind of closing your eyes, it just grounding yourself in the moment, and those kinds of things can be very helpful.
And what role does faith or spirituality have in these limit or catastrophic situations? How often do you see people claiming for a God? It doesn't have to be like Catholic or Judaism, simply something they believe on.
Sure, very common. Those are very common kinds of reactions that people have, and they can be, disasters certainly can be unusual in that they can pull the worst from us in terms of our reaction, but they can also pull out the best in us. And so in the literature and in practice, very often we'll think about things in terms of the emotional response people might have, the physical response people might have, and very often what is neglected, but what is receiving increasing attention is the idea that spirituality plays a critical role. And this can be both in a positive sense. So if I experience a tornado, if I experience a violence of some sort, I may pull my faith closer to me to try to make sense of things. And every human being is a meaning-making organism, if you will. And so people try to make sense of their circumstances, and one of the key ways that they do that is through their religious faith. And alternatively, I'd just like to point out that for many people going through a catastrophe, they may question their religious beliefs. It may push them away. They may wonder, why me? Why would my God let something bad happen to me or to someone that I love? And these are certainly questions of deep faith, and so many people will feel pulled closer to their religion, whereas some people will feel pulled away from it.
So we have positive and negative manifestations of this faith in the disasters. So you were also saying that disasters and catastrophic situations, they didn't define us. They could transform us, and they could become an opportunity for growth. So how can we transform this negative thing that will happen to our lives into something that we can use to grow as a person?
Sure, and it may seem very strange to kind of think about it, and so I always want to I talk about that in terms of disasters or opportunities for growth, ultimately. And so it may not be something that we recognize right away, but it can be something that as we are healing, as we are learning how to cope, some of the ways we draw meaning are we learn that we are stronger than we think. And very often we don't give ourselves credit for the strength that we have, our ability to pick ourselves up, kind of dust ourselves off when something happens, and to get moving again. And so meaning making is a critically important aspect of that. But in times of disasters, we very much learn who our true supports are, who are our true friends and true family that are there when we need them, who's there to help us pick ourselves up and get moving again. And so we can learn a lot about our strengths. We can learn a lot about ourselves, about our resources, and those are skills. Those are valuable things to know as you go forward. And so we sometimes use this term post-traumatic growth. And so in response to disasters, many people will experience post-traumatic growth in one or more areas. And so it's certainly a lengthy, healing can be a lengthy process, but it's helpful to think about disasters in terms of opportunities for growth and opportunities to choose an attitude of how I want to kind of stand up and pick myself up and keep moving forward.
And regarding the resources and the positive qualities that we have as human beings, would you consider faith as one?
That's a great question. I think certainly faith there's a lot of research on faith. Faith gives us a strong sense of why we're here, what our lives are about, or what we want our lives to be about. It can be very helpful in terms of having an understanding of why are we doing what we're doing? Why do we get out of bed in the morning? Why we do have a purpose, and I think very much faith can be tied into purpose. And when something bad happens, our faith can help pull us through something. It can help us to explain, help us to make sense of what may be impossible, really, to make some sense of. Yes. Yes, and so faith can be very powerful as a foundation for growth.
And to wrap up this wonderful encounter, I would like to ask you for an advice to all the young people that are watching us, about the difficulties, how to get over them, the resilience, the meaning of life. I don't know what you can tell us. What can you advise us, to take from the negative things that can happen in our life and grow from them?
That's a great question. Many of the philosophies that I study are from a book originally written by a man named Viktor Frankl, who was a psychiatrist in Vienna during World War II. And in this book, Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about how he was able to make sense of his circumstances as he was imprisoned in concentration camps during World War II. And so he had gone through some of the most horrifying circumstances that any human being can go through. And I found this to be very powerful. And I read this book for the first time when I was young, when I was in school, and when I was trying to make sense of what did I want my life to be about? Where did I want to go? What kind of impact did I want to have? And so my advice would be to each of you is to listen to that inner voice. What speaks to you, what resonates with you. And so it may be education, it may be family, it may be helping others in some way through volunteer work. And so having a sense of, helping to have a sense of what you want your life to be about. And that's not something really that people can tell you. You know, people tell you all the time, like, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. But ultimately, to do something meaningful for your life, to have value for yourself, you have to choose a path that makes sense to you, that resonates with you, that is that calls you, that is a calling. And so that would be the best advice that I think that I could give, would be to listen to that inner voice, listen to what speaks to you, and then pursue that with passion.
Another question just like popped out of my mind is hearing you talk, and how do you approach to those people who definitely don't want to live, like suicidal or those type of people that really lost all the meaning in life? How do you do to help them with the psychological stuff and the therapeutical like intervention? What would you do to help them regain that meaning?
That is also a great question, and we've done research work in the area of suicidality, and we do volunteer work and service work in the area of suicidality. And Frankl is often quoted as asking the question, you know, what keeps you from suicide? If you have someone who is having thoughts of self-harm, and very often in the answer, there will be clues about, well, maybe it's my family. Maybe I feel like I need to be there for them. I need to be there for my children or for my parents or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And very often when people feel suicidal, they have a great deal of difficulty remaining in touch with what they find to be meaningful and what calls to them. And intervention in suicidality very often is about helping to reestablish the motivation for life, the value for life, and to recognize that things have a way of getting better. And I would also point out that there are interventions. There is help that can be of tremendous use for folks if they are having thoughts of self-harm. And so that's a huge area where I think meaning and faith can come together in terms of, you know, helping people when they have thoughts of hurting themselves.
Stefan, thank you very much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here in our program, and we'll be seeing each other another time. Thank you very much. Bueno, amigos, ya lo escucharon. Este fue Stefan Schulenberg y nos contó unas cosas maravillosas y espero que les sirva para su vida y su día a día. Muchas gracias.